I am continuing in my reading. What I'm doing in this series is to read through the entire standard works of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. This consists of the Bible, the Book of Mormon, the Doctrine and Covenants, and the Pearl of Great Price. I am continuing reading in a chronological order, according to event, not according to publication or volume. So I'm skipping around a bit as I move along. So we're continuing with the Gospels. Christ has left the area of Judea after the Passover, as the Jews sought to kill him. He has done some healings, some miracles around the Galilee area, though he is rejected in Nazareth, and so he is now in the Capernaum area. While he is there, he calls John, James, Andrew, and Simon to the ministry. He then teaches in the synagogue and casts out an unclean spirit, the first time that he has cast out an unclean spirit, which just astounds the crowd. That's where we left it off. It's still the Sabbath. He just cast out the spirit. The synagogue, or the Sabbath meeting, is now over. Now this video we will be reading in Mark, then Luke, and then Matthew, all the same basic story. In this video we have a Joseph Smith translation. Now what the Joseph Smith translation is, this is a translation or correction done by Joseph Smith to restore those passages that have been lost or corrupted over the years. And so let us open up to Mark. Mark chapter 1. Verses 29 through 34. And forthwith, when they were come out of the synagogue, they entered into the house of Simon and Andrew, with James and John. But Simon's wife's mother lay sick of a fever, and anon they tell him of her. And he came and took her by the hand, and lifted her up, and immediately the fever left her, and she ministered unto them. And at even, when the sun did set, they brought unto him all that were diseased, and them that were possessed with devils. And all the city were gathered together at the door. And he healed many that were sick of divers diseases, and cast out many devils, and suffered not the devils to speak, because they knew him. So this is the healing of Peter's mother-in-law, Peter's wife's mother. So we know that Peter was married. I'm pretty sure that all of the apostles were married, but this is the only direct reference we have to such an arrangement. But they go to Peter's house, Peter and Andrew's house. So they're living together, which wouldn't have been uncommon. And Christ comes, John and James come. John and James, they're the partners of Peter and Andrew. So this isn't an unusual gathering, but then they hear that Peter's mother-in-law is sick. They get word of this. It is unlikely that she actually lives in the same house with them, because she is the mother-in-law. She would be living with her husband or her sons, not her son-in-law, unless she had no sons. But it says that Christ went and healed her. So it's likely that she was in a different place, or at least in a different building in the complex, because it wouldn't have been uncommon for people to have 4 or 5 buildings that would be considered their house or their home. And so, but he goes and heals her. And then she rises up and ministers to them. He has now cast out an unclean spirit in the synagogue. He has healed Peter's mother-in-law. He has done other miracles. And so when the sun sets, notice this, when the sun sets, that means the Sabbath is now over. Because in the Jewish calendar, this day begins at sunset. As soon as the sun goes down, it is the next day. So the Sabbath is now over. The people wait for the Sabbath to be over. Then they bring in the sick, and they bring in those possessed of devils. And before this, it may have been just that they brought the sick. Now they're bringing those possessed with the devils. So now that the Sabbath is over, they feel comfortable coming to Christ and having him heal everybody, and he does. He heals everybody that they bring to him. So this is one of those times that he does many, many miracles, but we're not given any details about them. So now let us look at the Joseph Smith translation from Mark here. So we have something in verses 30, 31, and 32. Not much here, but in 31, we simplify things here. It says in King James, but Simon's wife's mother lay sick of a fever, and anon they tell him of her. But we have this in the Joseph Smith translation. And Simon's wife's mother lay sick of a fever, and they besought him for her. So they didn't just tell him about it and he decided to go heal her. They asked him to come heal her. In verse 31, we have this addition at the end. It says, and she ministered unto them. Joseph Smith adds in, and she came and ministered unto them. Again, reinforcing that idea that she was not in the same house. They had to go, he had to go heal her, and then she came to their house to minister unto them. And then just simplifying in verse 32, we have the opening there, and at even when the sun did set. Joseph Smith makes this simpler, and at evening after sunset. So, minor changes. It does clarify that they were going to a different place to heal her, and that it was a request of Simon and his family that she be healed. But nothing real major there. So So now we are turning to Luke chapter 4, verses 38 through 41. And he arose out of the synagogue and entered into Simon's house. And Simon's wife's mother was taken with a great fever, and they besought him for her. And he stood over her, and rebuked the fever, and it left her. And immediately she arose and ministered unto them. Now when the sun was setting, all they that had any sick with divers diseases brought them unto him, and he laid his hands on every one of them, and healed them. And devils also came out of many, crying out, and saying, Thou art Christ, the Son of God. And he, rebuking them, suffered them not to speak, for they knew that he was Christ. Again, why didn't he want the devils declaring who he was? I mean, he declares it himself multiple times. But it is, in my opinion, that the devils would actually hinder the work, because people don't trust devils. Notice here also that the wording in Luke here, they besought him for her. This is the wording that we get in the Joseph Smith translation for Matthew. So Joseph Smith has kind of unified these accounts. And again, it is after sunset. But the other note here is that he laid his hands on them to heal them. He didn't just say, be healed. He performed the healing ordinance. But let us look at the Joseph Smith translation here. In 38 through 40, all have some minor changes here. Again, just grammatical. It says in beginning of 38, and he arose out of the synagogue. And it says in the Joseph Smith translation, and he arose and went out of the synagogue. Makes a lot more sense. He didn't rise up out of the synagogue. He stood up and then left. But again, just minor clarifications, nothing major. And like in 39, it says, and ministered unto them. Joseph would change that to and administered unto them. Just minor changes. Nothing of importance. So, let us now turn to Matthew. We read in Matthew 8, verses 14 through 17. And when Jesus was come into Peter's house, he saw his wife's mother laid and sick of a fever. And he touched her hand, and the fever left her. And she arose and ministered unto them. When the even was come, they brought unto him many that were possessed with devils, and he cast out the spirits with his word, and healed all that were sick. That it might be fulfilled which was spoken by Esaias the prophet, saying, Himself took our infirmities and bare our sicknesses. So once again we have Matthew making reference to prophecy being fulfilled. You'll also note that he does not state that they had to bring him word. Christ goes into Peter's house, and there's his mother-in-law sick. He's kind of condensing the story because his main purpose here is the fulfillment of the prophecy, not the details of the story. And so he's condensing it down for the purpose of his writing. It's kind of like what we would say with making movies today, taking artistic license with the historical record. That's what Matthew's doing. He's taking a little bit of literary license with his record to make his point. But there's nothing else new there, so let us turn to the Joseph Smith translation and see if there's anything new there. In verse 16, the only verse that has corrections, again, minor grammatical updates. So the King James says, when the even was come. Joseph Smith has, now when the evening was come. And later on, and he cast out the spirits with his word. And Joseph Smith, and he cast out the evil spirits with the word. Minor grammatical and language updates. So we leave that one here, and we continue with, again, more combined videos. So I will see you in the next one.